Hey, yo, what's good, everyone? Twisted here with Open Sorcery, and today I want to go ahead and talk about the Golden Rule. Now, for those who have been brought up in a Abrahamic background, particularly Christian, you likely are familiar with this sort of principle, but truth be told, it's something that, in whatever manner of phrasing, it varies from different religious organizations and belief systems, but this sort of principle is shared amongst all major religions, what have you, but within Christianity, it's usually referred to as the Golden Rule. And to go ahead and speak about that, right, before getting into it, this kind of follows my addressing of the principle of ask, seek, knock, however long ago it was, not too long ago, in the series of monologues or dialogues but in terms of ask, seek, knock, both of these sayings that are very popular within Christendom happen to be within mere verses of each other in the Christian Gospel of Matthew in the New Testament. And this is, so where ask, seek, knock was chapter 7, verse 7, this golden rule that I'm about to go ahead and recite is actually chapter 7, verse 12. And I will go ahead and, just like with the ask, seek, knock principle, go ahead and take from the New International Version interpretation or translation, just simply because, honestly, it's what was available and on hand. But yes, I think this one is close enough to usually how it is more so modernized and phrased nowadays. So yes. So in everything, do to others that you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. And by that, Christ at the end is referring to, principles that he was speaking about to start off the chapter, which included the aforementioned ask, seek, knock. But yes, onto the golden rule itself. Do to others what you would have them do to you. So in this sort of sense, right, it's, for those who are not necessarily aware, it's pretty much put someone else in your shoes and be like, what I want in action done unto me, right? Having a level of empathy before you go ahead and take action, thinking before you act, taking at least a moment or two to ponder, what I want someone doing this sort of shit to me, if it's a negative action, a positive action, neutral, what have you, right? And not just going ahead and flying off the handle or, just impulsively doing things, whether you think it'll be good or bad or what have you. And taking that little bit of extra moment or care, you can go ahead and, more likely have an outcome that is not only more so beneficial for the receiving party that action is being done towards, but also for you as well, right? And of course, that's just like, it can be a common sense thing, just on its face and hearing it, but in the actual world, in terms of how people actually go ahead and utilize it, it's not as often done as one would think. Now, in going ahead and trying to put it into a spiritual, metaphysical, magical lens, and all of that sort of thing, right? So, when we are thinking about doing unto others being like doing unto you, right? There is this notion that I know in the series of videos for Open Sorcery that, a while back I addressed this initially. And this was back in the video for energy cords and all of that. We're all interconnected. We're all intertwined. And, like, I am who I am, and Devi, my wonderful co-host, usually is who she is, and Lono, another one of our, co-hosts here, is who they are, and so on and so forth for different individuals that we come across and know throughout our lives, right? We are all living our own individual perspectives. But alas, we are all interconnected, right? And you could say it's kind of like a spider's web, or like, a lot of connected dots and all that sort of thing. And, the way that is explained in modern science, the buzz term of quantum entanglement and, the bending of space-time, in that sort of sense of like, it does not necessarily matter your actual physical location, but you may in fact go ahead and be in a different physical location than someone else, but there's still that connection, that atoms that we have within ourselves and atoms that are shared amongst other people. The general gist of the notion of quantum entanglement is that once atoms interact with each other, they remain connected over the vast distances of space-time. So in that sort of sense, right, at least looking at it from, once again, a modern scientific view, that once the Big Bang occurred, at least in the modern theory of how the universe, the material universe came to be and came to form, that the Big Bang occurred and all the material aspects of the universe were coalesced, and then, a big burst and expanded outward in all directions, right? In this sort of sense, because the atoms happen to be, in that particular very dense and small compacted space initially, that by the principle of quantum entanglement, they are all interconnected. Thus, as it expands throughout the void and darkness of space, there's still that interconnection between them, even though they are not within close physical proximity of each other. It can be light years, hundreds of light years, so on and so forth. And of course, that, in a macrocosmic sense, goes ahead and applies to people within a smaller context of, say, planet Earth and distances not being as vast, but still pretty dang large depending on the situation. And it varying, of course, but still. So in this sort of notion, right, if we're all interconnected, if we are all going ahead and, a part of the spider web, and, I will get to using another metaphor for it that is similar to that in just a little bit. But if we're all interconnected, right, if I am taking an action or doing something onto, just an environment or a person or an animal or a plant or so on and so forth, right, then it has ripple effects that affects, like, the larger scale of things. And yes, we can think of ourselves as one individual person, right? That what the hell type of impact do we have? What sort of, ability to influence other things do we really have? Like, it's kind of like, if I actually think about it, something else that I have tackled before is the idea of being a little fish in a big pond, and all of that, right? Where that particular theory, that particular mindset, that perception is that in a vast space, you're just a little small fish, and what you do doesn't measure up to others in that, right? In that same sort of sense, when you think about, existence as a whole, like, being a grain of sand amongst a very large beach next to a vast ocean, an endless ocean, under the stars and all these, the night sky and space, right? Like, think of yourself as that minuscule that you don't have any impact. But alas, under the understanding of do unto others as you have them do unto you, such is not necessarily truly the case, right? And, to go ahead and, expand upon that a bit more, right? Like, or at least, before expanding upon it, kind of retracting a little bit more so to kind of get back to the main point, and then kind of like, zooming out once again. But doing to others as you would have them doing to you, right? Like, I don't know, say you're walking down the street and for whatever reason you're irritated and you're not in the best mood, right? And just based on impulse, right? And I'm thinking of a negative sort of example for impulsive things. There could be, good things that are impulsive. But, just for example of like, taking thought before committing an action that might go ahead and screw you over. You're pissed off for whatever reason walking down the street. You accidentally bump into somebody. You both start talking shit, and then you start punching each other in the face, right? Or you punch somebody in the face, right? And say, oh yeah, you know what? Yeah, get the hell out of here. And say in that situation, we'll just go with the premise of you punching someone in the face and they don't do anything, right? Then under that premise, have you ever heard of karma, right? This being more so Eastern idea and principle that, it'll come back to bite you in the ass. Like, I'm sure, or there's a good chance you have heard that karma is a bitch, right? And there could be good karma, there could be bad karma, and this notion, whether it be within Eastern spirituality itself, and actual original natural root form of it, or in the West, you could say more so of a bastardized New Agey version, and all of that, and it being tied to past lives and reincarnation, the cycle of that, the wheel samsara, and all of that sort of thing, or even just within, shorter periods of time of within your own lifetime, right? That you go ahead and you do positive or negative actions, and they'll come back to reward you in a positive or negative manner based on what that action was. And with that, right, being wary and thinking about what it is that you're doing before you go ahead and do it, can go ahead and save you from getting a lot of negative shit put your way, right? And, being a little more considerate, being a little bit more so empathetic, realizing that, all right, you know what? Sure, I can go ahead and try to strong on my way through things and all of that, but alas, where's it really going to get me? And, or just like running on autopilot. Even if you don't necessarily have bad or negative intentions or selfish sort of behavior, right? If you're just doing things mindlessly, it may not be helping you or behooving you at all. And not thinking about the actions that you're committing can go ahead and lead to unwanted consequences. But back to the notion of zooming out a bit to go ahead and get a little more so understanding, right? So previously I was using the visual, the metaphor of a spider's web, right? Well, to go ahead and take from more so Eastern examples and, stories and or principles or what have you, right? This is something that I had addressed back in the talk about I am that I am and what have you. This principle, this notion of Indra's net, which is something that is spoken about in Hinduism and Buddhism, right? And in talking about that, I have an excerpt from learnedreligions.com to go ahead and give the general gist of this for those who are not necessarily as acquainted with or aware of it. But yes, Indra's jewel net, or the jewel net of Indra, is a much-loved metaphor of Mahayana Buddhism. It illustrates the interpenetration, intercausality, and interbeing of all things. Here's a metaphor. In the realm of the god Indra is a vast net that stretches infinitely in all directions. In each eye of the net is a single, brilliant, perfect jewel. Each jewel also reflects every other jewel, infinite in number, and each of the reflected images of the jewels bears the image of all the other jewels. Infinity to infinity. Whatever affects one jewel affects them all. So, in more so of a religious manner of wording, that's pretty much the idea, the core, perception of quantum entanglement and what have you, right? That is more so seen as secular or mundane sense by modern science. And, with that, right? If we're all interconnected, if we're all going ahead and having an impact on each other, from whatever perspective you want to see it, right? Spiritual, magical, occult, metaphysical, regular, secular, mundane, whatever the hell, right? If you're going ahead and recognizing that what you do matters and that your actions can go ahead and, affect others in a larger sense, a larger scale, and that what you're putting out, you're very much likely to get back, then, you may want to go ahead and be a bit more considerate and take a moment to realize what is it you're doing. And, of course, in phrasing this in a little bit more so of a cautionary manner and all of that sort of thing, like, that is not necessarily with the presumption that those who are listening are necessarily going ahead and doing just all detrimental actions, or if you're unaware of the golden rule, that you're just going ahead and doing inconsiderate or stupid shit by default. But, you can go ahead and you don't need to know about the golden rule and all that sort of thing, with whether it's the Christendom version or other religions having their own phrasing of it, to, just go ahead and be having a positive impact on the world, right? And of course, there are many people who do so. But, not all of us happen to always remember that. Sometimes we need a reminder, and even if you aren't necessarily doing it, right? And you can reflect and see that within yourself in your actions recently or over a longer stretch of time, right? It's always good to go ahead and keep it in mind, to keep it fresh on the brain, what have you. But yeah, and being that I, mentioned the golden rule, and that being more so of a Christian phrasing of doing to others as you would have done to yourself, right? I'll go ahead and read a couple more from different religious and belief systems to go ahead and close it out, what have you. Let me see. Let me just try to find it because I have a couple infographics that showcase them. So let's see. Okay, let's go with the one for Taoism right here. And, I don't know exactly what translation and all that sort of thing, but, we'll just go ahead with it. So yes, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. And according to this particular infographic, it states that this is from the Tiai Shang Kanyin Pian 213 to 218. Now, I am by no means the most acquainted with Taoist literature or, popular works or where it's quoted from. But, of course, I leave that unto you to go ahead and discover and read for yourself. And, of course, as I stated, this is from an infographic that I'm reading aloud. So, just go ahead and do a good old image search. Well, let's see. Let's go with Hinduism, because we were speaking about Indra's net. Why not? This is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. And this is from the Mahabharata. I don't know exactly the particular. It says 5 and then 15,017. I don't know exactly if it's regarded as chapters or verses or anything like that, somewhere to the biblical addressing of different parts of Scripture. But, that right there gets across the same message. And since we mentioned Buddhism as well, let's go ahead with another Eastern example and then close it out, pretty much. Treat not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. And that is from the Udana Varga 5:18. And, before truly closing it out, I would just like to go ahead and say that, in keeping this in mind, even for myself, it's not always, the easiest thing to do, because at times emotions come up, positive, negative, neutral, what have you, but you can be reactionary or impulsive to something, and, that not always being the best route. Conversely, there are times for impulsivity, but, it is more so about having an accurate gauge on when it's time to take a moment to think before acting, or when it is time to go with the flow of things and all of that, trusting the intuition. And also, on a more so less serious or preachy note, that, if you have listened to other times that I've gone ahead and spoken here, I usually try to do musical tie-ins of songs or albums or artists that I happen to enjoy, that, I kind of think of when, addressing a certain subject, what have you. And for this, since we mentioned karma, and karma being a bitch, and the whole notion of things going around and coming back around, gotta go ahead and mention that What Goes Around Comes Around by Justin Timberlake. One of my favorite jams by him, if not my favorite jam by Justin Timberlake. And definitely enjoy that quite a bit. Especially transition after Timberland goes ahead and starts getting involved vocally on the track. But yes, so with that all having been said, once again, do unto others as you have done unto yourself. That is what Christ said, and, sounds like a good manner to approach things in your everyday life. So with that having been said, this is Twisted with Open Sorcery, and stay frosty, nieces. Peace.